You're listening to the Full-Time Function Musician Podcast, the #1 resource for growing your function musician business. If you're a solo wedding singer, part of a 12-piece luxury show band, or anything in between, and want to learn from other successful musicians, you're in the right place.
You're listening to the Full-Time Function Musician Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 11. My name is Jack, and I am your host for this podcast, and I'm super excited to have you here. This podcast is all about helping you grow and manage your function musician business. Each week, I sit down with an amazing guest to discuss what's worked for them, what hasn't, and the valuable lessons that they've learned along the way. And together, we'll explore how to build a successful business without burning out in the process. Just a quick reminder before we get into today's episode that you can download my 7 essential marketing strategies for function musicians. This guide will help you figure out where you should be putting your marketing efforts with some actionable tips to help you get started. It's completely free and you can download it right now from my website, www.infocusrecordingcompany.co.uk/marketing guide, which is a really long address, so just find it in the episode description as well. There's also a couple of weeks to get your questions in for our upcoming mini episodes. If you have something you'd like specific help with in your business, or you have a certain question that you would like an answer to, then please get in touch. This can be anything to do with being a function musician or running a small business. If you want to submit a question, you can get in touch via Instagram or email, and those links are also in the episode description. That's it from me. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Tom Powell. You're listening to the Full-Time Function Musician Podcast, and on today's episode, I'm joined by wedding and event singer, guitarist, and DJ, Tom Powell. Tom, welcome to the podcast, man.
Hi, dude.
So Tom is a listener of the podcast, and he messaged me on Instagram with a really interesting topic that we're going to be diving into a bit later on this episode. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while now, you'll know that I'm a big advocate for niching down. But Tom wanted to talk about the opposite of that, almost, which I think will be super interesting. And that is how to make versatility your niche, and being able to thrive without specializing. Maybe even if you know that niching down could be a smart move for your business. But we will get into all of that a little bit later, as I said. First of all, I'm super excited to hear a little bit about you and all the things that you get up to, man.
Cool. Yeah. So I tend to do mainly weddings and function events and things like that. At the moment, I still do gigs in pubs and clubs, but quite strategically placed around the area so that I use those as almost like a marketing tool, really.
Okay.
I also do some international work as well. So I do cruises as a guest entertainer, which is slightly different to doing other cruise work where you're on as a resident or a part of the show team, because I just fly on and fly back off again.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I guess let's hear a little bit about where you got started and all of that as well.
So I started my first band when I was 15. I was right in the middle of my GCSEs. Great timing.
Yeah.
And it was just me singing with a couple of mates. They were on acoustic guitars. I didn't really play very much at the time. And our genius plan was to stay in touch when all of us went to different colleges. So for my 16th birthday, we recorded a little EP just of cover songs, very DIY. I call it charmingly terrible in hindsight. I took it down to our local pub, where I still live now, actually, and asked if they'd give us a gig. And they said yes, for some reason. And one of the lads, he had a dad who dabbled in a bit of singing. So he lent us his PA system. And then that was it, really. From 16 to 18, we gigged almost every week, mainly in pubs and clubs across Teesside, which is where I'm from. And even managed to bag some support slots for touring artists. The biggest being Ollie Murs, and that was our claim to fame for a while.
Yeah.
But then something really tragic happened. The other two lads massively got into the gym, discovered protein shakes, and lost all interest in music. So I went solo, which meant that a few things had to change. I had to buy a PA system instead of borrowing one.
Yeah.
I had to learn to play the guitar properly because I'd only dabbled. And I wasn't really confident enough to play live. But I had to figure out how to entertain a crowd all by myself without this sort of safety net of having the lads beside me.
Yeah.
So naturally, I started singing in care homes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Swing, Rat Pack, rock and roll, occasionally a song from a musical theatre, so like Les Mis, and that'd sneak in there. At the time, I was doing quite a lot of theatre in college, and I was singing in a really, really good choir, which was sort of training my ear really into singing harmonies and what have you. So by that kind of point, my musical influences were all over the place. Everything from classical and musical theatre to jazz, rock and roll, Britpop, whatever my parents listened to. So a lot of Queen, a lot of 80s, new wave, all of it really. And I love being able to mix things up at gigs, which we'll come on to a bit later on. But I'd be playing in a pub where absolutely no one was paying attention, and I'd do a set of so-called crowd pleasers, and then suddenly drop Ness and Dorma into the mix, and just as a head turner, really. And it worked. So at 20, I moved to London to do a drama degree, followed by a master's in creative producing. And while I was there, I worked freelance in live events production and kept up the music as a sideline, really. Mm-hmm. The odd wedding and function here and there, which came through from many of the agencies that you spoke about on the past episodes. So a Live Network, Encore, people like that. And so I'd be gigging in and around the home counties quite a lot, most weekends really. And I set up a 5-piece rock and roll band, an acoustic duo. So I was playing guitar and singing, and then I had a double bass player come and drop some bass in. Most of that work was through agencies. I wasn't really doing much of it myself. To be honest with you, I didn't take it hugely seriously. It was just a great way to make money alongside studying. Yeah. And then COVID. So as you've discussed before, the worst time to be a musician or a live events producer, because let's face it, both careers, whether you're doing live events producing or whether you're a musician, they kind of rely pretty heavily on public gathering. And suddenly all of that disappeared overnight. So there I was, locked away in my little London flat with no garden, no gigs, and no real reason to be there. So I made the decision to move back north. Theoretically, I was thinking I could produce an event from the end of my kitchen table, no matter where it is. So I might as well be somewhere with a bit of space, a bit of fresh air. Yeah. And then after COVID, I moved back to the Northeast, did one wedding fair up in Newcastle, and then I was instantly booked up for the next year, because there was this period of time after COVID where like everybody was getting married, and they were getting married on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and you just don't expect. So that was really, really busy. Last year, between my wife and I, who she's also a singer, we did 172 gigs, which I don't recommend. Yeah, we still play in bars strategically, so they weren't all weddings and what have you. But
well, it still takes up time, doesn't it? It's still lights and whatnot.
That's it. And we do prioritize weddings and events these days. This year we're focusing on sort of doing fewer gigs, but at a higher value. So we're booked in about 115, but to still making the same amount as, I mean, you laugh, but 172 down to 115 and making the same money. It's actually, it works out about a 30% increase in productivity.
I
don't know
great.
what I was doing last year. It's great to have to be managing things a bit more efficiently, And as sort of part of this new focus for the first time, I've started doing these international gigs. So I joined an agency that books guest entertainers on cruise ships. Did my first contract in January. Got another one in September. There's quite a few in the in between time, but I was already booked up for them.
Yeah.
And that's just a case of flying on, staying on for 5 or 6 days. I do 2 gigs during that time, two evenings, and then live like a guest until they fly me home. So
nice. Yeah, sounds great, man. Generally, I feel like everyone else I've spoken to on this podcast sort of got into cruises earlier and then now want to stay at home more, but you sort of done it the opposite way, which is interesting.
Yeah, the agent said to me that basically you don't really get cruise gigs without going on for long periods of time.
Yeah.
You can't just walk on as a guest entertainer. You've got to get your sea legs first. But they said I'd basically done all my sea legs and, got my experience on land. So they were happy. This particular agency were really happy to take a bit of a punt with me and take a bit of a risk. Generally speaking, you don't get booked unless you've got like a show reel of you performing on a ship and it's like really specific. Yeah. But the agency that I was working with, they've got exclusive entertainment that they produce all the entertainment for this particular ship that I went on in January. So I was able to go on that one as my first ship, get it all recorded, get loads of nice footage, and then that will sell me to other cruise lines as well. So it's really lucky. When I was a bit younger, I didn't want to go away for months at a time because I was worried that I'd lose my client base. Yeah. Which I think is always a worry. And if anybody is listening that is having that sort of debate in their head, I'd say just, especially if you're single and if you don't have a huge amount holding you, back to the UK, go and get that experience. For me, I was in a long-term relationship and all the rest of it. I didn't want to go away for months on end. But it is a great way from being on there in January. Just for the week, I got to meet a lot of the show team and the other resident musicians that were on board, and they're enjoying themselves. They're having a really good experience, and it's changed their lives. So it's a good thing to do.
Yeah. And getting to travel and getting paid for it, like there's just nothing better than that, I think.
Yeah, no, you're so right.
I just want to circle back slightly to the wedding stuff where you said obviously you'd done 170 odd last year and you're doing less this year but making the same money. How did you make that happen?
Well, I guess it wasn't 170 odd weddings, and that's what's
right.
changed is that there was a lot of weddings, and it's so the way that I work, because we'll go on to talk about versatility soon, but I can sort of cater for somebody's ceremony. I might do acoustic stuff, then drinks reception, it might be swing or jazz or what have you, wedding breakfast, then I'll do the evening entertainment, and then I'll DJ for them. So I don't have to do that. I can do like bits of that throughout the day, but it was just about upselling really and going, okay, now you're thinking about bringing me in for evening entertainment. Have you thought about anything earlier on in the day? And they usually look at me like, what? Live music during the day? I'm like, oh yeah, you might want to consider like singing waiters, or you might want to consider whatever, and changing the style up. And so that's how I've sort of upsold. So it's the same day, but I'm there longer, so I'm making more money on it. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing less of the pubs and clubs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Smart. Do you ever do stuff with your partner as well? Or?
Yeah. We've got a duo show as well. She's sort of newer into the industry. We met through theatre and we met at uni. But she always had this fantastic voice, but wasn't doing as much with it, in terms of gigs and what have you. So when we eventually moved in together, that was one of the first things we did, is set out getting her some gigs and building up her experience. And so we've got a duo show. We do themed nights. So the other week we were doing like a Grease themed sing-along night. And we just sang the soundtrack from Grease, but with all the words up on the screen and what have you. And we do all sorts of other little, songs from the shows, or we'll do an acoustic duo set or what have you. So,
yeah. Sounds like you are super busy.
Well, yeah, we are busy, but enjoying it as well.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, are you a kind of person that likes being busy?
Yeah, 100%. I've got to be busy. I mean, one of the things, even during the lockdown, I've just got this sort of compulsion to just like create stuff, and because I couldn't really do as much of that during lockdown, I produced my housemate's album for her, or like EP for her, just using what we had in the house. We had a lot of instruments and I had quite a bit of studio gear. And then I started building like tables out of reclaimed scaffold boards and what have you, just because I had this sort of compulsion to keep busy. So, and just sort of selling them on Facebook Marketplace, just not for a huge amount of money, but just to keep me busy, really.
Yeah, awesome, man. Love that. So yeah, let's get into being versatile a little bit then. And first of all, I guess I'd like to start with like your thoughts on the subject, like when you messaged me and what you were thinking at that point.
So first off, let me just say, Jack, I absolutely love the Full-Time Function Musician podcast. I found it an absolute goldmine of advice. I've binged around 40 episodes now. And I've been just sort of soaking all these marketing tips like a sponge, and quite an overwhelmed sponge as well. When it comes to marketing myself online, I'm pretty useless, or I have been pretty useless. I post, I engage. I've got a website that I'm really happy with. And I think I've booked maybe 5% of my gigs through social media, which is not a huge amount, and it might not even be that, you know. So moving forwards, I'm sort of trying to commit to implementing some of the digital marketing strategies that have been discussed on your pod over the next few months. And if they work, I'll happily come back and spill the beans on which ones didn't work for me.
Yeah, that'd be great, man.
And I totally understand and get the whole finding your niche thing, and it makes perfect sense. Especially with the way that social media algorithms work and SEO. And if you can make it super clear what you do and you package that up digitally, then the platforms know who to shove your content in front of. And so it's a brilliant strategy on that front. And then it's the big but. If I tried to apply that to myself, I would actually lose a lot of business.
Yeah.
Because my USP, and this is just going off like customer testimonials and things like that, is versatility. So I show up to a wedding and, like I say, I'll serenade the ceremony with some acoustic vibes, then switch it up and do something a bit more vintage for the drinks reception. Maybe have some sort of like relaxed ballads during the wedding breakfast. And then it's all upbeat in the evening, and then I'll DJ. Or I can even bring my band with me on the evening. So that's an option that I include for people. Or I can duet with my wife or bring a double bass player. So I can cover that whole day. And it's one point of contact. It's one set of equipment and one client call, really. So all the logistics are sort of much easier. There's less of a headache for the client. And the more sections of the day that they book, I can offer them a bigger discount as well.
Yeah.
So I've had over 100 reviews on Google and Facebook and what have you. All of them 5-star, and just that word versatile pops up everywhere.
Yeah.
And if I suddenly decided to niche down and only push, say, vintage Tom, that'd mean setting up separate socials for acoustic Tom, show tunes Tom, pop and rock Tom, whatever else. And I'd have more personalities than a soap opera.
Yeah.
So, it probably would be a really good business move if there were more of me to manage.
Oh yeah, that's impossible. Running like more than 2 Instagrams, I think
it's hard, isn't it? Yeah. So, and I do know people who run more than 2, and like fair play to them. It's great, but I could not do that. I barely manage the socials that I do have. So for me, the best way to get bookings hasn't been through hyper targeted like social media content. It's about smashing a live gig at a busy bar on a non-premium night, which is what I mean by these gigs that are public gigs are strategically placed. So I'm earning less than I would on a Saturday doing a wedding. But if it's a solo set like I'm doing tonight at my local on a Thursday for 160 quid, it's it's still a busy bar. It's full of people who will become my clients.
Yeah.
And I'm actually getting paid to essentially rehearse. And because I don't really prep for public gigs. They're just kind of, I sort of take them as they come sort of thing and follow the audience and what have you. So it's like a paid rehearsal, and it's paid. I'm getting paid to market myself, or a Sunday afternoon, for like 200 quid or whatever.
Yeah,
it's the same sort of thing. And then I can also grab some footage, get some good snaps for my socials. But I haven't spent a penny on advertising at that point.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, man. I think it's such a smart way of thinking about doing pub gigs and things like that. Yeah, I love that. When did you sort of like change your mentality on those kind of gigs, or did you always have that kind of thought process?
So I think I've avoided like that. That was another key thing from the pod, is the full-time function musician sort of, if you like, title or label or what have you. I've avoided calling myself an out-and-out musician for many years, even though that's what I was making the bulk of my income from, because I was doing all these other things. And I think it was probably last year, maybe the year before, where I stopped seeing it as a side project. I was like, actually, if I'm doing this much of it, it's pretty legit. So,
yeah.
And I think it's just been a gradual thing. The more I've seen other people, like other professionals, like niche down and get their social medias looking really sharp and what have you, I've gone, oh yeah, that's great. I wonder how I could do that. Even before listening to the pod, I wonder how that would work for me. And so I sort of worked out that I was taking every booking I could get at one point. But then it's about actually where in and around where I live, I only want one venue really. So I'll support that venue. That I'll pick a venue that particularly supports and we've got supports me, and we've got a good relationship. And I'll just gig in that venue in and around my area, but in some neighbouring areas. So around me, you've got Darlington, you've got Redcar, you've got, I'll just pick one venue in each of theirs as well. So I just sort of started to not accept bookings from other venues that were nearby that particular venue in that particular location. And just said, like, if you want to see me in Darlington, you've got to come down to the Red Lion, because that's the only place you're going to see me local to that area. Yeah. And I do get a lot of clients that, like, if they live in and around that area, that's where they use as their opportunity to come see me play. And they enjoy that. And then you get to talk to them a bit and learn a bit about them. It's more of a social way of connecting with the client than moving, like, than doing everything via instant messenger or even, on screen. But the other thing as well, I think, is there's this sort of midweek hustle, where like weddings are mostly on weekends. So what do you do to keep the money rolling in, like Monday to Thursday? So for me, it's things like women's institutes and Rotary clubs, care homes. Like, I still do that now, because if I pop out for an hour on a lunchtime, which generally is what all they're looking for is an hour's entertainment, it's an easy 100 quid just to walk away with. There's no faff. I don't bring a massive setup like I do for the weddings. Barely any prep really. It's just turn up, sing a few bangers, meet some lovely people, make them happy, and it's really rewarding as well. So it keeps me sort of connected to my community, which I don't think we talk about enough. Really, is how much of a positive impact we get. Ignoring the money, but that sort of community fulfillment that we get from doing those kinds of gigs. There's nothing better than watching a room full of like 80-year-olds just light up when I'm singing La Vie en Rose in French, and then I'll sing Little Old Wine Drinker by Dean Martin. But you can't do that kind of music at a wedding, really, or maybe La Vie en Rose. But, with like a millennial wedding, that's not the sort of material that I'd have picked. So I'm not disagreeing. That's the key thing I wanted to say. I'm not disagreeing with the niching down approach. It does work for a lot of people. Yeah. And I want emerging musicians to think that is a good thing to do, but I also want them to consider that versatility is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, well, versatility is almost your niche, and like weddings is almost what is. You can have wide niches or like really narrow niches. And I think just saying that you do weddings or advertising yourself as a wedding singer, that's a niche already. So I think it's important to say as well, like I advocate niching down a lot because it's worked for me. And I've seen it worked for other musicians really well as well. But there's 100% more than one way of doing things. And that's why I really was really excited about the message you sent in this conversation, because I think it's really important. And musicians need to be versatile, and they need to. I mean, so many people that have been on this podcast, they don't do one thing. They do so many other things. They do bands, they do solo, they do tributes, they do, And again, I think my important point is that when you do those things, it's not saying that you can't do them. It's about advertising them in the right way. And I think that you do that on your Instagram and on your website and stuff. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about how you do advertise yourself when you do have such a broad range of things. So, I mean, do you focus most of your advertising towards weddings? I suppose you don't really advertise to the pubs things because you go to them personally and speak to them, right?
Yeah. So with the pubs, I don't advertise at all. I'm not actively seeking to grow that market, so I wouldn't waste sort of time and energy on doing that. The only pubs I perform in are those that I've got an existing relationship with, and it works on the right day of the week for me. And I'll maybe do 3 a year in each, so I give them an option of like 3 dates a year. And that works. So that kind of runs itself. I don't need to put much effort into that. I'll do them posters and what have you, and I'll send them out to them, but I don't need to advertise it to get more gigs in that sense. So I think until this year, really, I wasn't really advertising myself well at all. I was throwing everything up onto the agency websites, getting a lot of traction that way because they're doing all the marketing on my behalf, which is why I absolutely advocate for using agencies, and they're not the devil incarnate as a lot of musicians think they are. Like, they might take their 15%, 20%, what have you, but they're doing a lot of work. They've got a big platform. They've got a lot of expenses. They've got overheads. So like, that's why they're doing it. It's called the music business or the music industry for a reason. So everyone's got a place in it. And so I was doing that to start with. And then things slowed down a bit. I don't quite know why. I think somebody was saying before that actually towards the back end of last year and this year, things have slowed down weddings wise in terms of like, even the agencies are saying they've slowed down. There's a lot more private bookings with parties and what have you, but less on the weddings side. So maybe it's that. Maybe it's an algorithm thing. Maybe it's because there's so many agencies that, they're few and further between. I'm not sure. But that started to slow down a bit. I thought, right, I've actually got to pull my finger out here and do a bit. So I'll be honest with you, I have started aiming a lot more content towards wedding clients. Even daft things like using the right hashtags. I haven't paid for any ads to aim towards wedding clients, but it is something I'm considering towards the sort of back end of the year potentially, and putting some budget aside to see what I've got left by that point. But put some budget aside to do that. But yeah, everything is kind of gently aimed, I would say, at wedding clients at the moment. Yeah,
and. I suppose, part of that is saying how versatile you are as well. And I love the upselling thing that you do as well. Do you mainly advertise yourself as a singer or a guitarist or both, and then everything else comes after that?
Yeah, so I think I do generally call myself a singer. Guitar has always been second for me, but then if I'm advertising myself as a singer and there's a picture of me playing guitar and singing, then my audience will put two and two together quite quickly. So on my main website, as you go on, there's some sort of clips of me performing and what have you, and most of them are without a guitar, but then the odd one will come in with, the odd video will flash through with a guitar, and you can sort of channel your own experience on the website. So you can say, right, from the homepage, if I want to go to weddings, if I'm getting married or what have you, then you click the wedding section, and it's laid out in such a way that it follows quite obviously really through the different packages that I provide, there's some images of me doing those different packages, so you can see the kind of vibe I'm going for. And some of them, like I say, will be with a guitar, some without. So I don't need to explicitly play up the guitar stuff. It just kind of it transpires really.
Yeah.
But I always say to wedding clients and to other artists that I help out to sort of find their platform, if you can adapt to different crowds, you'll always have work.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Playing the same genre every single night can get quite repetitive. But for weddings especially, you've got guests from all over the country, sometimes all over the world, all ages, all backgrounds. They're not all going to want the same thing. So being able to mix it up for weddings can be a real strength.
Mm. I guess it keeps it exciting for you as well, right? And just as you said, I've written down some points where that I thought were really good reasons to be versatile and not to niche down. And one of those was that you can adapt to changing trends. And as you said, like weddings maybe for some reason are going in decline, so you'll be quite quick and easy to adapt to that. Whereas if you're like just a wedding singer, then that's going to be more difficult. I also said that it will be avoid burnout from playing the same set every time, and I think that would be really exciting as well. So do you get a lot of bookings coming from weddings that you're at as well? Yeah,
and that's a key thing really. So I'm glad you picked up on that. You're not just trying to create a moment for people that is just okay and you're just kind of there, because that's not going to inspire them to leave a testimonial. That's not going to inspire them to, like other guests, to go, oh, I want that person, because you want it to be memorable. So a lot of guests, if they hear me singing something, they'll come up to me like during my break or what have you and go, oh, we're getting married as well. And we thought that particular song was great or what have you. So it's going back to like when I said about the Ness and Dorma, it's those sort of like little head turner moments. I never play the same set twice. I always, without fail, even at pub gigs, I sort of change it up based on who's in the room. But I've had it in the past where I've done the Ed Sheeran Perfect, which is like the number one wedding song these days. And then I go into the Andrea Bocelli Italian bit about halfway through, and suddenly like all eyes are on me just for a brief second, but it just gives them that quick head turn, and then they can go back to the drinks reception, their conversations, what have you. And then they come up to me afterwards and go, that was brilliant. My cousin lives in Italy and is getting married. I've sent him the video or what have you, so that's really useful. Yeah, that's interesting, man. When did you think that might be a head turning moment when you first came up with it, or did you just try it out one day and it worked? I tried it out because I got requested it, because with the classical side of things that I did when I was a lot younger, the choirs and what have you, there's a lot of Italian in those, so I knew I could sort of bend towards Italian styles of music. And then when they released that song, Andrea Bocelli and Ed Sheeran, I thought, oh, that's nice. I should try that one day, but it'll take a bit of learning. Because I'll be honest, I'm a little bit lazy when it comes to learning new music. I pick it up on the day kind of thing. And I'm like, oh yeah, I can busk through that. That's fine. But you can't really busk through a foreign language. So you do have to sit down and get it right. Same with La Vie en Rose, the Edith Piaf. So I think it was requested once. I was like, right, I've got to really focus on learning that and getting it right, because they were Italian. It's an Italian family. So I was like, right, got to get this right. And it just worked. So my focus wasn't on creating the head turner moment that time. It was just about getting it right. But then when it worked, it was like, right, okay, this is going to be something. And now I get requested it all the time. Doesn't matter where I am. Like people who have seen my socials and seen that happen, they come up to me all the time. Or they've been in the room before when I've done it, and they come up and put that request in. So. This podcast is sponsored by my business, In Focus Recording Company. At In Focus, we specialize in creating exciting cinematic show reels for professional function musicians. We also offer photo shoots and custom logo design, helping you bring all your branding together into one cohesive package.
Whether you're a solo artist or part of a 12-piece luxury show band, having standout promo material and strong branding is essential to growing your business and booking more gigs. If you're interested in checking out some of our work and learning more, head over to infocusrecordingcompany.co.uk. I feel like we've pretty much covered our topic today, unless there's any final thoughts that you had before we move on to the next section.
No, that's good.
I think, just like final words is niching down can work really well for people, but so can being versatile. And I think it's important just to go out and try things and see what works for you.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is that it is hard not to have a niche, or maybe harder, because you don't always know how to showcase. For me, I don't always know how to showcase the breadth of what I do in like one post or in a week's post or what have you. But it's just about accepting that maybe different platforms will, you can sort of get different clients out of different platforms. So like my Instagram is very heavily focused on weddings, whereas my website is much more broad, and people could spend a bit more time on a website that they wouldn't necessarily spend on your Instagram. And then like marketing at the pubs is like a bit of everything, because I don't know if someone's got a birthday, or I've been booked for like Euros, parties to when a group of lads watching the Euros or what have you. Like, it has to be versatile at the pubs.
Yeah. Really. Just to add to that, how do people find your website? Are they finding that through Instagram, or is that more of a Google thing or something else?
I get very little through Instagram, because up until maybe Christmas, most of my insights, I wasn't really looking at the insights. So I got about 1,500 followers or something like that. And they were basically people that had seen me perform. So I was sort of preaching to the converted, really. So my tone was much more conversational and much more engaging with people that already knew who I was.
Yeah.
Since Christmas, that's been, and because of the pod, that's completely changed. So I've been trying to acquire new audiences. And so a lot of my posts go to non-followers now, because of, the trying to play the algorithms game and trying to use the right hashtags and what have you. And so I don't know yet. Basically, before now, very little came through Instagram. It was just a way of keeping my followers updated on where I was and what I was doing. Now it's about using it more as a sales tool. So we'll see. I'm going to keep monitoring that as we go through the year. Most of it comes from people looking for musicians in Teesside. I can see that on the SEO analysis that people type musicians Teesside and not even wedding singer or anything like that. It tends to be musicians Teesside that is the top hit, really. And then they come and find my website that way, and then they find my socials from that. So
yeah, are you coming out quite high on Google then?
Not as high as I'd like.
Yeah.
But again, it's something that I'm sort of new to working on, really. So I'm looking forward to monitoring that change. I mean, I think over the last 2 months, it was suggesting that I'd made something like a 350% increase and I only tweaked a few little things based on tips that I'd heard on the pod. So, whether that's sustainable or not, we'll see.
Yeah.
But over the course of a year, I'm hoping that goes in the right direction, and they can all become a bit more of a sales tool than just keeping people updated with where I am and what I'm doing.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, man, let's move on to some of your best gigs and worst gigs. I'm now liking to start with something that may be one of your worst gigs, and then ending on a nicer note with one of your best gigs. What you got for us?
Okay, so worst gigs. You have to strap in for this one. I've got two that come to mind. Firstly, so we're in London, in Dulwich, and I'm at this wedding. I'm DJing actually, because it was a last minute gig. The original DJ was poorly. It was via an agency, and I said, no worries, I'll step in. Got the tunes going, everyone's vibing. This beautiful big old house. And the mother of the groom rocks up and requests ABBA. Great choice. Love a bit of ABBA. So I've already got a few requests already lined up. So I tell her that I'll get it in at the perfect moment. She toddles off. The next song comes on, and it's not ABBA yet. She marches over, full on like Face of Thunder. And before I can even say, like, it's coming on, don't worry, she slaps me across the face. So I don't know about you, but I don't go to work to be assaulted.
Yeah.
So I did what any self-respecting DJ would do, and I pulled the volume down and I just walked out of the room.
Yeah.
Went to find the couple, told them what had happened. And to their credit, to be fair, they were absolutely mortified, apologized, put his mum in a taxi, and that was sort of enough for me to go, okay, well, fair enough. That's, the client's also mortified. So I got back to work, and the night was a banger after that. But yeah, I didn't expect that. The second one is more to do with being a musician, if you like, being a performer. And it's got a few layers. So it was actually quite recently. That's why it's at the top of my mind. I haven't done many bad gigs. And I've often said to people that, like, once the live music's flowing, it's good vibes. So why would you have a bad gig?
Yeah.
But this one is quite recent. So it was, I won't tell you who the client was, but it was booked through an agency. It was like an award ceremony. From the start, the communication was just chaos. Spoke to the client. She knew about half the details, got passed on to a venue contact. Turns out they weren't even going to be there on the night. So then got passed to another person at the venue. Now the contract said I'd arrive at 8:00. I'd have my performance at 9 and I'd be finished by 11, which is kind of standard, really, sort of 2 sets within 2 hours. And that's what I was getting paid for. But from the venue, I got, oh, well, people will already be in the room by 8:00. You can't come in and start setting up at that point. So I said, oh, I can't get there, because they'd suggested I get there for 6:00. I said, I can't get there as early as that. I've got another gig earlier in the day. But actually, just as a gesture of goodwill, smooth things over, I'll get there for 7. And I was essentially giving them a free hour of my time. Like, I'd set up nice and early and then I'd just chill for an hour. And I could have gone back to the agency and said, oh, no, they need to pay wait time. But I just said, take the easy route. And when I say this gig was badly run, it was like watching a slow motion car crash. I got there ahead of schedule. First set goes really well. The guests are really lovely. But the organizer was really frosty with me. There was no green room refreshments, not even any water. The MC was getting a 3-course meal, but I couldn't even get a bottle of water. So they had their award ceremony during my interval, and I was told it'd take no more than 45 minutes, which is already longer than the contract had suggested, but fine. It drags on for an hour and 25 minutes. So actually they finished their award ceremony at 11:15 p.m. and I was contracted to finish performing my second set at 11, and I hadn't even gone on for the second set. And she was just expecting me to start another set. I'd been there 4.5 hours, starving, dehydrated, still unpaid. So I went over to the organizer and I just said really politely, I said, I'm going to have to go. So can we sort payment? And she sort of checked the time. Oh, it was supposed to be cash, wasn't it? Can I bank transfer it to you? So I just said, yeah, sure, fine. So she does the bank transfer immediately. As soon as it goes in, she just sort of turns her back on me. No thanks, no, great job. Just turns her back on me. Oh, wow, okay. I promise I'm coming to the end. But if that wasn't enough, she later then tells the agent, well, Tom only performed for 30 minutes. But that was funny because I'd actually filmed the whole of my first set, which is a 45-minute set.
Yeah.
And so I just sent the agent the footage and said, no, that was the first set. It's a full 45 minutes. You're welcome to watch it. Please don't share it anywhere, because it was just for my own records. And she claimed that, like, I never asked her what she wanted me to do for the last 15 minutes of her event. But why would I perform for free past the agreed time? If she wanted me to, like, maybe she could have asked me, but she didn't.
Yeah.
she just expected me to be psychic. So I said to the agent, I said, look, what about the no food or drink situation, which was in the contract? The client had said to her, well, our MC is a volunteer who does this for free, but Tom was getting a full fee. And I was like, since when does, like, whether you pay a person have anything to do with whether you feed the professional that you've hired. It was just unreal. And I've never had an experience like it. I'm really thankful. Like, she never let she wasn't a Karen that just left a 1-star review. And, she was happy to have that conversation with the agent. I think the agent cooled her down, but it was like, gosh, I cannot believe that. It was terrible.
Yeah, that's heard that kind of story too many times. But I think that's the first physical abuse story that we've had on the podcast.
Yeah.
So how about some of your better experiences, man?
Better experiences. I'd like to say supporting Ollie Murs.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how did that actually come about as well?
It was so long ago now that I can't quite remember it. I think there was like a local support competition, maybe that it was a big open air thing that a local promoter was putting on, and I think they just ran like a local competition sort of thing, and we entered and somehow managed to get through. So 5,000 people, massive stage, other support acts, Diana Vickers off X Factor, and Ilya Lilly as well. And she was really cool. And it was amazing. And I still look back on it with this big cheesy grin, and I still tell people about it. But like, genuinely, my best gigs are the kind of gigs where as soon as I've finished, I like have to call my wife and be like, oh, you'll never guess what. Like, and it just sort of hit differently for some reason. So like I mentioned the Women's Institute earlier on, and I did a WI gig the other week, and this lovely, lovely lady came up to me at the end and told me that she hadn't danced or sung along to any music since her husband had passed away.
Oh, yeah.
But that afternoon, she just had the best time. And like, it's so special, you know?
Yeah.
I did a care home last year, I think, and there was a lady with dementia who'd lost the ability to speak properly or coherently. And I did 45 minutes of sort of swing and jazz and then 15 minutes of rock and roll. She sang every single word, like to every single song. And it's just things like that just stick with you.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like functions and things, I just love weddings. The parties and stuff like birthdays and what have you are great, but I've never had a bad wedding. Other than that DJ slap. Just the sort of the energy, the emotion, like everyone from grandma to groomsmen are like up for a sing along, and it's great. And there's always cake. Can't argue with the cake.
Good stuff, man. Love that. Yeah. Cool. So let's move on to our quick fire round. And to start things off, what is the most effective thing that you've done to market yourself or your business?
So a curveball, really. Probably investing in the right gear from the get-go. Mm-hmm. It doesn't immediately sound like a marketing thing, but like buy brand new for one, so you can return it if it breaks. You can register like warranties on it, and you can write it off your tax return. Self-assessment perks, you know. But like during lockdown, I splashed out on like a snazzy 4K camera that allowed me to do continuous filming, so I could just sort of stick it at the back of a room and let it roll for the whole gig. And that gives me content to pump out on the socials and on my website. And I use that same camera for my live sessions in lockdown as well. And then I took it to bars, weddings, and I even took it on board the cruise ship in January to film my theatre show. So a hefty investment to start with, but it's a business expense. Yeah. And it's not just cameras. I've done it with getting a Mac that actually works, quality PA systems, instruments, all the good stuff. When it comes to sort of this line of work, I think good gear is everything, and it helps you look professional, you sound great, and it's all deductible. So
yeah, it's a good answer. What have you learned in the last 3 months that you wish you knew 3 years ago?
Well, for starters, the Full-Time Function Musicians podcast has been an absolute game changer. So there's lots of like little hacks and what have you, and stories from other musicians that's great. So, but as a function musician, you're usually you're sort of usually gigging when everybody else is as well. So there's not much overlap. It's a bit like sort of like passing ships.
Yeah.
So I like that this podcast sort of brings community together in a way that it's really valuable. So I'm going to take the tips from that. Really, and I wish you'd started it up years and years ago, Jack. That'd have been great. There's so many nuggets. It's great.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. If you were just starting out now, what's the first thing you'd do?
Build a better online presence, probably. I'd start with that. Show people what you want to be. Present yourself as how you want to be presented online. It sounds a bit like a no-brainer, but make sure your website looks sharp. Make sure it's really easy to navigate, because you want to give people a reason to book you, and the more reasons they've got not to book you, they won't, so they'll go somewhere else. There's a lot of us about. I do genuinely believe there's enough work for everybody, and I don't believe in sort of competition within musicians. I'm much more a fan of collaboration. But yeah, I'd probably start. The website gives you the the overarching look of how you want to be presented. And then I think you can go into your socials from there, really. Post loads of videos.
Yeah, solid. What is the biggest mistake that you've made, and what did you learn from it?
So I've been working as a musician since I was about 15 or 16, but I didn't really take it seriously until COVID hit. Gigging every week, making decent money, but also juggling college and uni and a master's degree and producing events for other people. But right in front of me was this obvious passion and just a knack for being a musician and entertaining. But for some reason, I just treated it like a side hustle. Probably didn't have the sort of confidence really to think that I could actually make it work full time, and how on earth would I be able to get a mortgage, and how could I get a decent quality lifestyle just from music. But then when all the other stuff that I was juggling went out the window during COVID, it was like a light bulb went off. So I could actually focus on the music thing, plan it out and make it a bit more strategic. And I increasingly do that. But then I went the other way, as we've discussed, and I got too busy. So I was so stressed about the financial side of things that I just said yes to every gig that came my way. And I think that's a big learning point as well. So now that I've learned to work smarter and not harder, I can sort of avoid burnout, and not just sort of hustle for the sake of it.
Yeah.
I was chatting with a photographer about it on Saturday, because they have wedding season where they're really, really busy. And then over the Christmas or the sort of winter season, they're a little bit, they can manage it a little bit easier. Whereas with a musician, you sort of get November really as a breather, and then it's straight through Christmas, and that's a really busy period as well. So yeah, just avoiding burnout would be great.
Yeah. Lastly then, do you use any specific tools or apps that help manage your business?
For bookings, I use Trello. I don't know if anybody's come across that. I'm sure they will have. A friend from a project I was doing with the UN introduced me to it, and just keeps everything nice and tidy. So you, for those who don't know, your client details, your contracts, your invoicing, it can all be stored in sort of one place. It integrates with Google Drive and Dropbox and all that kind of stuff. But every booking gets its own card, and I could sort these cards into lists in progress. Let's say I'm still chatting to the client and finalizing things. Booking complete when I've sent the contract, within the next month for those little check-ins with clients, and then post-show, so for chasing testimonials and things like that. It's got all the details and attachments and checklists, and it syncs with my calendar on my phone. So when I rock up to a gig and the band's asking me, how much are we getting paid or whatever, I just have to click on the date on my calendar on my phone, and it opens up the card that is relevant to that gig, and it's all just there. It happens a lot at gigs where you go up to the manager at the end and to get payment, or whoever's giving you the payment, and they say, how much do I owe you? and you're like, oh, it's there, it's right on your. On your I will also mention as well, for social media, I gave Blaze a go, Blaze AI, in January, and it's like a mix of Hootsuite and ChatGPT and Canva as this like AI scheduler. It sounded amazing. I didn't really click with it, so I've actually cancelled my subscription. But I'm sure some people will. I think for me, the scheduling, which is, I just use Business Manager for that on the, or Business Suite or whatever it's called on Meta. But it just felt a bit clunky, and that's really important for me that is right. So the content creation stuff's really, really good, like a mix of ChatGPT and Canva. Yeah. But personally, I'm not a fan of throwing out loads of stock photos or AI visuals. So that's what it's really good at. Right. I prefer just the Meta business app for scheduling and checking insights, and keeps it a bit more simple. But I still use Canva for design stuff.
Yeah, can't beat Canva at the minute.
No.
Awesome, man. This has been really fun. That pretty much brings us to it, unless there's anything that you wish I'd asked you or anything else you think we'd like to talk about.
Well, I can talk for England, as you can hear. So we'll keep it brief, but I just think like networking, I think, is the only thing we haven't really discussed. And I'll just a little bit on that. Like to any new artist in particular, or if you're just moving from, one industry into thinking about being a full-time musician, like network, like your business depends on it, because it does. Like my best gigs have come from just talking to people, other musicians, wedding suppliers, event planners, just like being memorable, but for all the right reasons. Yeah. Following up, asking for feedback, all that kind of stuff. And you can do it in a really, I'm not doing the Haaland stay humble thing, but like you can be humble about it, and business doesn't have to be as cutthroat as it looks. Yeah. And like you were saying, Jack, like trends change. So what's popular today might not be tomorrow. So being adaptable, it means that you're not relying on one style or one market that could just like dry up or gradually just cease to exist. And it's funny, isn't it? Because most instrumentalists in bands don't need to niche down. They can be a drummer in a jazz band one day, or a rock band the next day, or an orchestra the next, At the end of the day, I think music's just about enjoyment. And if you like playing different styles, don't limit yourself. A varied career is often a happier one. Yeah.
It's good ender, man. I think we've done nearly 50 odd episodes now, and I think the reoccurring theme of how to get work that keeps coming up is networking. It's just get out there, speak to people, and make connections. Is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, most people are nice. That's the thing, especially in the music sort of in the creative industries. Yeah, most people are nice.
Yeah. Awesome, man. This has been really fun. I've really enjoyed talking to you. So just to finish then, if people wanted to connect with you or find out more about you, whereabouts would you send them?
So tompowellmusic.com. That's 2 L's in Powell, tompowellmusic.com. Or you can find me on all the socials at Tom Powell Music.
Wicked. And of course, I'll put those in the show notes as well. Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on and having a chat with me.
Cheers, dude. Appreciate it.
So there we go. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Tom for coming on and chatting to me. I really, really enjoyed that episode. And it's always great when people that listen to the podcast get in touch to be involved. So that's it from me. Take it easy. I'll catch you next week for episode 12.